Hi everyone! Today we'll be looking at the key steps to take when analysing poetry. These are the 4 major things we will be looking at. Keep watching to see how we can apply them to our analysis. Also make sure to watch till the end for some extra exam tips. The first thing to take into consideration when analysing a poem, which is often overlooked, is the title. The title is important because it is the first impression we have of the poem as the reader. Sometimes the title can seem quite insignificant. However, for most poems, it always hints at the key aspects and mood of the poem. For example, one-worded titles can represent feelings of isolation and loneliness, solidity, or a significant time or location. This is exemplified in William Blake's London, where we can see a specific location as a standalone noun, emphasizing the themes of isolation and corruption. Another example is Exposure by Wilfred Owen, which has a double meaning, both echoing the soldier feeling exposed to death at war and also the narrator poetically exposing the reality of being on the battlefield despite how glorified it is. Titles can also have language techniques within them, so check if your title has any alliteration or metaphors. Just note that metaphors may also hint at a conceit or an extended metaphor in your poem. Another key thing to check is if your title references a particular character or figure. Well, what do I mean by this? If the poem you're analysing mentions daughter or grandfather, for example, this is how poets are able to effectively reflect on a relationship without making it too personal. Therefore, the lack of identity can be an indication that the poem is meant to be relatable. Also, poems often lack a character's name, which is an effect that intrigues the reader more. Lastly, the lack of identity can also imply other things. For example, Browning's My Last Duchess lacks her name, suggesting the narrator's dismissive attitude towards her. The second and more common aspect of poetry we analyse is the structural techniques used by the poet. Here we can look at things like the main body of the poem, rhyme schemes, and use of long and short sentences. The main body of the poem means we're looking at how many stanzas the poem has, if they're regular or irregular, how the poem opens and closes, and any repetition of particular words or phrases. Make sure to discuss the impact of these in your responses. So, for example, a regular rhyme scheme or stanza structure can represent a consistency in emotion like love, power, or solitude. However, an irregular rhyme scheme or stanza structure can make the poem less rhythmic and therefore reflect a lack of order or add a more serious tone. In Follower by Seamus Heaney, we can see the poem has a fairly regular structure, mirroring the father's repeated routine of hard work and labour. Also, each stanza has an A-B rhyme scheme, with the A's being the half or slant rhyme, whilst the B's being a complete rhyme. This symbolises that whilst the narrator strongly admires his father for his hard work, it seems he may never live up to his father's strong determination and passion, also hence the title, Follower. So what do we do if a poem has no rhyme scheme at all? Well, sometimes this in itself can suggest a lack of hope and optimism, or loss. Always take a look at the key themes of your poem and try to see if any interlink with your structure. Try and have a go on your own. Pause the video for a moment and see what other structural techniques you can find in these stanzas. Now let's take a look at language techniques. Language techniques are usually what we automatically resort to when analysing poems. Here is a list of some of the most commonly used ones. My one tip would be, once you identify them in your planning stage, have a think about their impact, the writer's intention, and what effect it leaves on you as a reader. These are all things which you can later add into your explanation to get more marks. Make sure to make a note of any techniques you might be unfamiliar with. This is the same set of stanzas we just looked at for Heaney's Follower. Take a minute to pause and have a read through the language techniques identified and their impact. See if you can find any more language techniques too. If you'd like more details on how to identify language techniques, make sure to check out one of my videos where we analyse a full poem. Lastly, we look for any shifts in tone. This can be indicated through a change in rhyme scheme, long sentences and short sentences, and even rhyming couplets throughout or at the end of the poem. In Remains by Armitage, we can see the poem begins casual and conversational, but by the end of the poem, we can see the narrator has been filled with guilt and psychological torment after the shooting which occurs in the previous stanzas. Therefore, we can see how the tone shifts throughout the poem, reflecting the emotional experience of the narrator. Make sure to also keep an eye out for things like rhyme schemes suddenly changing or stopping, as this can also indicate a shift in tone. Have a think about how this might link to the narrator's emotions or experiences within the concept of the poem. In summary, we must take these four aspects into consideration when analysing poetry. Another very important point to make is to ensure that you're considering context where you can. Have a think about how to link this in with the writer's intention and the impact they are creating on the reader. This especially applies to students who are working from an anthology collection. Unlike unseen poetry, with the poems you are studying now, examiners will expect you to link in context in your responses. For more help on this, make sure to watch my video on how to write peel paragraphs. This is where we will discuss how to interweave context effectively in your exam responses. And that concludes the 4 basic steps you need to analyse any poem. Hope this video was helpful and thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.